Hello, and welcome to the Driving the Business of Science podcast. I'm Keith Parent, CEO of Square Group and RegDocs 365. Before we start our discussion today, a little bit about the companies. For over 30 years, Square Group has been a managed service technology company dedicated to empowering those who change lives. Our audit-ready compliant cloud, ARC, infrastructure provides life science companies with the highest level of data integrity from preclinical to clinical and regulatory approval for manufacturing. RegDocs 365 is a validated content repository for all content for R&D, regulatory submissions, clinical supply chain, CROs, anybody that really needs to have qualified and validated infrastructure for their content repository. We support many startups as well as some of the largest international life science companies. Our suite of solutions include validated hostings, AI solutions, content repositories. We are the life science cloud behind Domino Cloud for life science, and many other aspects. We're experts in understanding how to deal with life science IT infrastructure. Today, I am speaking with Kalyan Obalampalli. Kalyan, KO, as he goes, and he'll talk about that in a second. I'll let him tell you about his company. I've dealt with Kalyan for a number of years now. KO has done a great job at helping small companies and large companies look at vendor management and what they do in vendor management. I thought it was a great topic today for everybody to hear what that's all about. KO, how about taking it away? Give us some background on you.
Sure, Keith. First of all, it's a pleasure to be on the first episode of this podcast. My name is Kalyan Obalampalli, but I just go by KO for short. I've known Keith for quite some time now. He's been a great friend and an advocate for our company. So the goal of today's meeting, as Keith just said, would be just to talk about vendor selection management. How can we do things better and keep it generic, and hopefully provide a couple of pointers based on the 500 million plus contracts that we have facilitated through ClinAI. Maybe share some of the learnings that we have based on our interactions with sponsors. So looking forward to it, Keith.
Great. So, KO, one of the things I want to talk about, tell us a little bit about your journey in clinical operations, your background, and what made you form the company.
Sure. As someone in ClinOps, I've been selecting and managing vendors using Excel files for more than 18 years. And there's inherent challenges with that. We're managing 20, 30, $40 million of contracts at times. And, selecting them is one thing, comparing the vendors across each other. I just thought there's got to be a better way for doing this. In 2019, in fact, I selected vendors for more than $100 million, and then I decided, you know, there's got to be a better way. I looked around for companies that do this, none of them met my expectations. So I thought, let me just go ahead and start the company up myself. So we started the company. As soon as we launched, we had beta customers who became paying customers, and since then we haven't looked back. So that's a little bit about how we got started, and what the journey has been so far.
I think that's great. One of the nice things about working with KO is I like to bring to, we talk about this podcast being driving the business of science. What a lot of people don't realize is there's some great science out there, and a lot of times that science never sees the light of day because sometimes those companies that are startup companies or mid-sized companies can't get out of their own way sometimes, and sometimes you got to really help them out. So when I find a company that I think does a great job at what they bring out a new process, I want to make sure that we're working with them and we're offering that out to our customer base. So when I saw what KO was putting together, and I saw some of the output that they were generating in a comparison of multiple CROs for any kind of a clinical trial, I thought it was fantastic, and I thought that I'd love to have him working with some of our customers. So it was pretty easy for me to be able to do that. So, what do you think about the existing processes these biotechs take today, and what do you think you can do to try to help them in selecting and managing those vendors?
Yeah, I mean, the way we do it right now is ClinOps or outsourcing is at the heart of this vendor selection, and they're the ones working with all the different departments within a biotech or a pharma company, put the RFP together in the form of Excel and paper, send it out via email. It goes to 5 or 6 different vendors. Every vendor responds in their own way. So some of them have 200 lines in their budget, some others have 300 lines, and some of them divided by geographic area, some of them don't. Some of them even have different currencies in their budgets. So I'm not just talking about budgets here, but there's also RFI questions which you have to look through to make sure the vendor is suitable for your trial, and there's enrollment projections, timelines, etc. So all this there's so many different pieces of information. For example, there was an article written about us in the Clinical Leader. There were there was CRO selection, 6 vendors were approached. 2 different approaches is what the sponsor wanted the vendors to bid on. So that's 12 proposals. And each of those proposals, there's a budget, there's an RFI, there's an enrollment projections, and there is a resources document, all of them in Excel and Word, etc. So it's 40 plus Excel files. I mean, forget about, you want to negotiate with each of these vendors and get the best price. But even before that, even comparing them one to one becomes difficult. So it's not necessary that you have to use a platform like ClinAI. My point is these are some of the challenges that are out there, and a lot of these things can be solved even without technology. For example, simple things that I've seen, like if I had to talk about a few tips that current companies could use without even using a platform like ours. ClinAI obviously helps with harmonizing the entire process. We help you create your RFP, send it out to the vendors. Vendors respond on the cloud, and then we provide you with the analytics. But even if you did not use a platform like that, I think some of the simple stuff like there has to be a process. There have to be clear templates that the vendors need to complete. For example, I've seen cases where the sponsors are don't provide a template, and sometimes they're wondering, would the vendor even use my template? They should, because they're the ones who are getting the business from you. So you should keep them accountable and have them use the templates. Reach out to multiple CROs. If you reach out to 5 6 CROs, and if you have the templates similar, then you can compare them easily. And when you go to the CROs, perhaps you can go to 2 big ones, 2 small ones, 2 medium ones, and provide feedback to the vendors and negotiate with them. Ask them the right questions. So you have to ask them, if you like, how are they going to share the risk with you? So if you don't ask the right questions, how are you going to know if this CRO is the right one for you or not? So just to not to go on there, but essentially there has to be a process. There have to be templates. You should be going to multiple vendors. You shouldn't leave dollars on the table. Ask the right questions. Ask them for enrollment projections, and most importantly, if they provide you projections, ask them, how are you going to share the risk with us? Because most of the time, I think from all our experiences, I think I can say this, that the the projections, etc., that are put in front of you, how many CROs are actually going to meet them? It's not just about CROs, central labs, all these are big ticket items. So I would say those are some of the challenges. And maybe I went into the how to deal with it too, but that's my 2 cents on the challenges and how you could potentially, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for that answer. I was going to ask you a quick question around CROs in general, because it seems like, everybody knows who the major CROs out there, and nobody ever got fired for choosing a big CRO, right? But then you find out that, you were talking to the A team when you got in there, and then you get the B team or the C team or whatever, and when you start doing the work, the real question is, how do you look at those companies that are working like that they already have their favorite vendors and they're only going to go out there and they haven't tested the waters? Because in my experience, I found that there's lots of good small CROs that are actually much more nimble, much more willing to work with you, and they all can work with whatever software you have. You shouldn't be forced to have to use their stuff because you're hiring them to do the work.
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand, is how people feel like they have to use what they tell them they have to do.
I think that's one of the inherent issues in the industry. For example, right, most of the people, we had done a survey in 2019, 2020 timeframe to see how do clinical operations or outsourcing experts select the vendors. Either they've worked with them before, either they know of them, they've met them at a conference, etc. Instead of focusing on things like, how complicated is your study, what therapeutic area is it, does this involve pediatric patients, and how many geographies does it involve, which countries do you want to go to, etc. I'm just saying, and it's not their fault, because I guess the information just doesn't exist out there in a structured format that they can pick as a specific vendor based on their needs. So with that in the background, um, yeah, you're absolutely right. So in the lifetime of a project manager, somebody who becomes a senior director, how many CROs would they have worked with in their career? 3, 4, 5, maybe. But there are so many CROs out there. So going by your experience is what most of them do, instead of actually giving them a chance. And I think you're absolutely right in that. I think um, there's a lot of value in going out there, talking to some of the smaller vendors, trying to get the best deal. So I do believe we definitely leave dollars on the table when we select CROs. Secondly, I think we always go with these large names. I think it's almost like a halo bias. When a large CRO comes in and says we're available and we can do this, I think some of the small companies are almost afraid to say no. And then it turns out that it's probably not their best decision because now, as you said, they don't get the A teams. I'm not talking about every CRO. Some of the best experiences I've had are with large CROs, but I was also with really powerful companies where we would get the best people. So if I
Don't
have,
you also, okay, I don't interrupt you for a
yeah,
second.
no, no, go
Don't
ahead.
you, don't you also think that sometimes the CRO you go with, it should be, again, fit for purpose? We talk about fit for purpose a lot. And a lot of times I can understand going with a major CRO if you're going to be doing a multi-country study and you've got a lot of issues that you're going to deal with, lots of different regulatory authorities because you're going to do multiple things. But if you're going to have a small study and it's going to be in one therapeutic area and you know the company that you're dealing with, wouldn't it be better to find somebody that's kind of tied in that? And when I think about your platform and I think about some of the things that you guys do, it would seem that it's a great way to compare and contrast different companies that could potentially do the same work for you.
Absolutely. I think fit for purpose is the key term, whether it's patient engagement or any other thing. So absolutely. So some of these challenges that you talked about, for example, people getting the B team, etc., or the clickbait where they promise you a team, but that's not the team that you get. These are problems that we've been discussing since I started my career in 2006, and we're still there. Sometimes I feel, why haven't we resolved? Because even if you go to conferences, we're still talking about the same thing: site startup. How do you talk to the sites? And I don't know if we're all doing it. So doing what it takes to make some of these processes faster. So fit for purpose is key, and I believe we just have to come out of this belief that a larger company might be a better fit for you, or you don't want to say no because let's say a CEO brings in a big company either for a CRO or an ETMF, for example, that is really expensive. A lot of times I've seen clinical operations experts, they may not be able to say no because if the CEO is bringing it in. Uh, so I think we just have to get out of the mindset of just. Uh, I think we have to challenge the status quo
I
essentially.
think I think one of the things that we all have experienced have been where you've gone out and you've tried to work with a team. They like to see what that you've got. They like everything you've put together. You put together a nice proposal for them. It fits with their budget and everything. All of a sudden, the CEO comes in and says, "Oh, we're going to use these guys." So one of the nice things I think that I like about what your platform offers is the ability to see multiple companies, and that if the CEO were to come in and do that and say, "Hey, you got to use these guys," at least you would have the financial backing to be able to show what you could be saving should you go with somebody else. Have you experienced that
Yeah.
in the companies you've been working with so far?
Yeah, I think that's where the platform comes in quite handy. And it is the case that, sometimes the CEO has a relationship and he believes that this is the company, or I don't want to take names, but this big company is the one that we should be working with. I think that's where the platform comes in handy. For example, we recently had a vendor selection where one of the companies came in really low, or they were almost on par with everybody else, but this was a huge company, and we were wondering why. And when we removed the investigator grants from the total numbers, it turns out this company was really high compared to the others. So investigator grants obviously are money that you're paying to the sites. And if somebody uses a really small number for the investigator grants, they may appear to be the cheapest, cheap or and on par with everybody else. But when you start the study, all these project management costs, all the other buckets were really high. So the platform shows you. I mean, it allows you to mix and match, look at different vendors, and you know, look at all the permutations and combinations, so that any of these outliers are, you can quickly see them. Or, for example, we had another example where all the other CROs had said, they would enroll at a enrollment rate of about 0.12, and there was one who was almost at 0.19. Either they know somebody that nobody else knows. They know something about these trials that nobody else knows about, or they're just making up numbers because they don't know what the real enrollment rate is going to be. So parsing through the numbers, looking, being able to see what different buckets cost, and being able to see what have the vendors promised, all of that in one place, I think is really important. And that's where even if the CEO says, I want to go with this company, then you have the numbers. You can demonstrate that these are the ones this company is this is what they're promising. And you can go into detail, ask them, why do you think you can enroll at 0.19? Maybe they know something that the other big CROs don't know at that time. So the platform just puts everything in a structured process so that not only can you compare, but you can also negotiate. And once you negotiate, you ask all the right questions. Your internal team then gets a chance to rate these vendors on different categories. And once you take your internal stakeholder input, now you can make a more informed decision. So the goal, Keith, is to provide you with a data-driven decision-making framework, which I believe has been missing all throughout this time.
You and I both know that most companies use Excel for everything, right? So they're going to do their comparisons in Excel. They're going to put things together, but nothing's ever going to be in the same format. It's going to be all over. They do so much extra work when they do that. Tell us some more of the pain points that you see when you're dealing with companies doing vendor selection.
I think first thing I say is, a lot of times the question that comes up during my meetings is, oh, we can do all this with Excel. And my answer is absolutely. You can do it. You can do it in Excel. Once the vendors send it back, you can try to compare them one to one or spend all the time to put them in the right buckets. And, you can even negotiate them back and forth with the vendors. But the point is, when you have a 300-line budget with 20 columns in 4 different geographies, in which you're conducting the trial, it's really hard to compare them in Excel, keep track of all the formula, and then let's say you go to 6 vendors, they all submit their budgets, you've compared them once. A couple of them make changes and send it back to you. How are you gonna make sure that they followed the same Excel file, or they did not add any new lines? So it's really hard to compare them. So you can do everything using Excel, but I think it just makes sense to use something a little more advanced than Excel when you're dealing with contracts that are 20, $30 million. So I think overall, in terms of the other challenges, I think I was working with one company where we were helping them negotiate a change order using our vendor management platform. And they haven't discussed what the enrollment rate was going to be. This was a basket study, and that they should have agreed upon enrollment rates for different uh, ba- uh, enrollment cohorts. They didn't do that. And 1.5 year into it, how are you going to keep the vendor accountable if you haven't even decided what the enrollment rates are going to be? And when this question came up, one of the answers was, hey, but we have all these protocol changes. So even if we had decided on an enrollment rate, it wouldn't really be applicable. I mean, of course, there will be challenges once you start a trial. There will be protocol amendments and all that stuff. When the study is active and the sites are active, you should at least know how many patients they're going to enroll. So I think it's essentially on the sponsor side. I don't think we always ask the right questions or have the right amount of time to select the vendor, because all the other departments I feel get a lot of time to write the protocol, finalize the protocol, get FDA feedback and all that stuff. But once FDA says go, everything is rush, rush, rush. Within 3 months, you got to select all your vendors and start your study. And we have crazy milestones like FPI that I don't really agree, that I've never agreed with. How is FPI the most important milestone? It is important for the Wall Street, but I think there's some blame to be had on the sponsor side because we don't take enough time and give the vendors enough time to put their best foot forward. There's some blame to be on the vendor side because they provide you with so many documents that you're overwhelmed and perhaps promise things that may not be able to be. So I think that there needs to be a balance between these two. I hope that.
One of the big things in the business of science right now, everybody's talking about AI and how it's getting built into a lot of different things. We see it a lot outside of the life science industry. How do
Yeah.
you see it going in vendor management and vendor selection, things that you're working on? You've got, ClinAI in the name. Tell me a little bit about where you see the future going and what your thoughts are there.
So right now we're focusing on vendor selection and management, but there's a lot of when we have meetings with the client, because we have the data, there's a lot of questions about I I think the ask in most people's mind is, can we use the data that we have to predict what the costs are going to be in the future for upcoming studies, and also try and compare and tell them, give the user the confidence that they're actually paying the right amount to the vendor for that specific trial. So I think more moving forward, the more data that we have, across all the different disease states and phases, etc. I think this will definitely help the clients where artificial intelligence can be used to predict what the costs are going to be and whether they're whatever that they're paying the vendors is along the lines of what they should be paying. So
You
we're
know, once you get enough data collected across all your
yeah.
studies, I'd love to talk to you more about that process, because that seems like that would be a very interesting way for people to look at, different parts of the trial itself. When you look at
Yeah.
all the different line items in a clinical trial, if you start to break those things down and you do analysis of those, it would be very interesting to see what your look like depending on the size of the companies, the size of the CROs you work with, things like that.
If I can add one thing there, I think one of the important things that I feel is I think we should build something that people will actually use. So we're listening to our customers, and they're the ones telling us this is the need that we have, and this is what we want in the future. So I think that's been our main focus, because I think there are a lot of tools out there that may, you know, to an extent do the job, but I don't think they're doing the what I'm getting to essentially is that I think there are softwares that were built for some other industries that have been that clinical has been forced to use, even for timelines and milestones, for example. There's some software out there that software companies use that have been forced on biotech and pharma companies that I don't think really work well. So I think the key is for for any companies that are out there to listen to the customer and create stuff that ClinOps or clinical trial related departments can actually use.
All right, great. If someone needs to reach out to you, what's the best way they can reach out to you?
You can go to our website, clin.ai. Or we're really active on LinkedIn. Any of these places, there's a place where you can contact us, reach out for a demo, and we'll be more than happy to speak with you or just show you what we have. And I've always had a mantra that I don't assume that anybody needs us. Our goal is to just share with you what we do at ClinAI and see if there may or may not be a need for us. So
And for anybody
that's
in the
been our
industry that
approach.
goes out to a lot of different clinical shows, I see KO everywhere. So that's a good place to find you as well. So
I
uh,
think as a founder, that's something that everybody has to do. This year we'll be at about 20 conferences, I believe. So we'll see you at one of those.
KO, I thank you very much for your time today. This has been the Business of Science and podcast. And KO, thank you very much being our inaugural podcast. It was awesome having you on the show. Thank you very much.
Anytime, kid. I wish you the best.
Thank you, buddy. Take care. Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye.